Welcome to Order Militaris Radio TV, and we're lifelong Catholics, and what we do is all for free, and for our love of Jesus Christ, and for Holy Mother, the Church, and we'll defend our Holy Mother, the Church. Since our Twitter program went so well yesterday, and I happened to watch just the right program yesterday, we're coming back with another program, The Battle for the Mind and the Soul. And we're with Brother Alexis Bonolo.
AJ, there's an old saying, when you're over the target, you receive the flak. That's how you know you're over the target. That comes from the Second World War when they did night bombing and they couldn't really see if they were over the right city. But when they started getting AA guns, the anti-aircraft guns firing at them, then they knew they were over the target. And whew, we really stirred up a nest of worms of the last bees of the last two programs that we did. And I had someone block my cell phone so I couldn't upload anything. I mean, I could download things in 1.5 seconds, so that would take me 2.5 hours to upload. That's never happened to me anywhere. So they have one of my the cell phones I use tagged already as being verboten, not committed. We have strange people knocking at your doors and making noise outside in the middle of nowhere where no one just walks by. So we're continuing our dissident radio here, Catholic dissidents. We're the true opposition, the one that they can't stand. You know, you don't hear of anyone else having cell phones blocked or in websites hacked. It doesn't happen to anyone else, and that's because we put out quality stuff here. This is just stupid stuff. So today, AJ has written me really wonderful questions. I feel like I have to put my hat on at the Scholastica, my medieval Don's hat, and start talking about scholastic theology, because these are really profound questions, and they're not easy to answer. But if you studied Bonaventure and Thomas Aquinas, you can answer these questions precisely and help understand it. And AJ, you've chosen the 7 questions around which the whole battle for transhumanism is going to take place. And Catholics need to know the answers, okay? Mm-hmm. Because we are the ones who, with the more powerful ammunition here. When it comes to philosophy and theology, we have all the atomic bomb, intercontinental ballistic missiles of truth. Our opposition is in the Stone Age, okay? And I'll explain why.
So yesterday I was watching on the awesome YouTube channel, Transhumanism 2.0, and it's 30 odd minutes, and we'll get into but it's all about taking over the mind. So, what is the mind?
Okay, so here we have to make several distinctions. First, I'll talk about what the mind is. Then I'm going to talk about what they think the mind is. And this is a very important distinction. So when we say the mind in English, we are using the Anglo-Saxon form for the word mens in Latin, which is the equivalent of the Greek word nous, okay? And the Greeks, when they speak of the nous, they speak of the mind, sometimes translated as the soul. And the reason why they define the soul as the mind is the pagan Greeks, I'm not talking about the Christian Greeks or the Catholic Greeks. The pagan Greeks believed that at the beginning of the origin of all things, there were 2 inimical, contrary beings. There was matter and there was spirit. And through battles and encounters and mixings and confusions, you have the world we have today. And they believe that matter is always opposed to spirit and spirit is always opposed to matter. And you see this in the philosophy of Aristotle, where he talks of his hylomorphic theory of metaphysics, that everything is composed of matter, which he called good, and a form or shape. And when shape encounters a certain kind of wood, then it produces a table or a chair, or he uses woods in a metaphoric sense, or as we would say, matter in English meaning potentiality. And since the Greeks were smart enough to understand, writers like Aristotle and Plato, that man's ability to comprehend, to think, to reason was something beyond matter. They located it in the spiritual plane, and in that part of man they called the nous, the mind. And in Plato's philosophy, the mind is some kind of spiritual spark that has separated itself from the world of spirit and come to dwell in flesh. And the Greeks were very open to ideas such as reincarnation, but they didn't believe in that. After death, the mind separated from the flesh, and the two had nothing to do with one another. They didn't believe the body had anything to do. So that's what they thought the mind was. And Christian writers, when they encountered the philosophy of Aristotle and Plato, they realized this was totally wrong, because God created man, body, and soul. He breathed in him the breath of life. And in the biblical revealed truth about man, there is no separation of body and soul. The body you have is a reflection of your soul, and the soul you have is a reflection of your body. And even in the resurrection, you'll have the same body. It might not have the deformities and problems you have in this world if you rise to everlasting life, or it'll have much worse ugliness and problems if you rise to everlasting death. And so in the truths revealed by God, what we are is more than mind and body, because the soul is more than mind. So the mind in the Greek conception of things has no relationship to the flesh, whereas the soul in Christian theology is not only the intellect, the mind, and the will, it is also the ability to animate a body and to keep the flesh warm and to generate life and to feel emotions, whether it's sadness or anger. The soul is involved in all those things. The soul goes all the way down into the flesh, and this is the big difference between what the globalists think the mind is and what we Christians know the mind is. So, as St. Thomas Aquinas and the other scholastics will say, your intellect and your will together, that is the mind. But your will is not in your heart, and your intellect's not in your head. Your will and your intellect are as much in your pinky as into your big toe, as in the hairs on your head. And this is a hard thing to understand, because the soul is not in one place. It is over one place. So how can we compare it? So a ball is in one place, but a farmer of a field is all over that field. He can be in any place of it because it's his field and he's taking care of it. And so right up to the border, he could be mending the fence, or in the center, he could be taking a rock out of the field, and he's plowing it constantly and maintaining it. And this is what the soul is. The soul has dominion over the whole body. The body's its territory, and it is equally in any part of it, but it is not a part of it. And it can't animate two bodies. It can only animate one body. And this is why when twins are born or tied together, we know that there's two souls there, not one. Unless, of course, one of the twins is dead, and then we know the one is there, and you cut the dead flesh off. So there is something in Christian theology, therefore, in what the Bible teaches us, it is impossible to be reincarnated. And this is one of the big things moderns have a hard time understanding, because we're hit with all kinds of Masonic propaganda. Reincarnation in the Hindu sense, that you come back as a different form of life or a different human being. Theoretically speaking, in the Christian view of things, if your soul could take flesh again, and it will on the day of last judgment, it's going to take the same body, because it's the soul. The soul is to the body like a hand is to a glove. My hand is this big, it's not going to get into a little woman's glove. It has to get into a glove that's this big. Otherwise, it's not going to get into it. And it's the same thing with the soul. That doesn't mean you have a bigger soul, you have a bigger body, but it means that's just the way it is. So not souls are not equal. In Christian theology, we do not believe that all men are created equal. We believe all men are created in equal dignity with an equal nature, but not that they're equal, not in magnitude, ability, or powers. They're not equal. And God decides the souls we get in that. He's the creator of the soul. The parents give what is necessary for the body. So the mind, the intellect and will is only a part of our being. It isn't even a whole of our being. If you could say the soul is half and the body is half, well, the intellect and will aren't even all of the soul. So it's a very small amount. And there is a big difference between your intellect and your will. We hold in Christian theology that your ability to choose between things is the foundation of your liberty, and it is absolutely free. There's nothing inclining one way or the other. You can always step aside from that. Your intellect might be limited in according to what you know, because we learn through our senses. But you can always have an insight that no one taught you. You can always see a solution that no one even indicated to you. And the reason for this is that the soul has no parts. So our soul is an immortal being. It's purely spiritual, but it is simple in the sense that it has no parts. That means it is more simple than the number one. So when you write out the number one, you have to take parts and put a symbol down. You understand what the number one does. But the soul is so simple, it is above one. It's above all numbers. And this is why we human beings can do mathematics, because we have an intellect that is more simple than any number. We can comprehend all numbers. And here is where the globalists fail, because the globalists don't believe that that is the mind. The globalists believe the mind is, I'm going to say, the kind of like the psychological state of the neurons in your cranium. Okay. The self-awareness that is generated, which is only apparent. They believe the mind is something like the software running in the machine. Okay. But that's all physical. That's not spiritual. You could have all the neurons running in the brain and still could not think. I mean, apes and chimpanzees have brains almost identical to ours. Why can't they think?
Mhm.
They don't have a soul. Animals don't have a soul that is like ours, that is spiritual and moral. And that's why they die and have no memories. And they have no ability to communicate and think rationally the way we do. So the globalists get it all mixed up because they're trying to capture the glove on the hand. They think the glove is what moves and is intelligence. They don't realize it's the soul is animating that. And so our thoughts, our words, our imaginations, our dreams, insofar as we can picture them, feel them, sense them, express them, and that others can know of them, that's not our soul. Those are things caused by our soul, using the body as an instrument. And your soul is just as present in you as the soul is present in a child who might be mentally retarded and never be able to speak. That mentally retarded a child, or that blind person or deaf person, they have no less an intellect than you. Just they don't have the tools in their body to be able to express that. And that is why you should always treat the retarded, the handicapped, with great dignity, because you might think they can't understand anything you're saying, but they can understand it quite well, even though they can't repeat back to you. Maybe all they can do is squeeze your hand. And this is where Christian civilization towers above all others. It was Christians who invented burials for the unborn. The catechisms in ancient Rome were expanded tremendously when Rome became Christian, because Christian Catholics buried unborn children. We were the only ones who did it. The rest threw them in the garbage or in the fireplace or to the dogs. So this is where our great respect for life comes. Even if the human being's only one cell big, There's a soul there. That's an immortal being. And this is why we revere so much the life of the unborn, the life of the born. And why murder is such a horrible violation of the Christian religion. Because there's something more there than flesh, something more there than matter that has a real relation. See, if it's like the Greeks, well, if I killed him, I separated his mind from the body. He's better off now. The Hindus believe that too. So no, because the soul belongs in that body, and that body belongs to the soul. You've committed a grave, a grave. This is why in Christianity we don't believe death is natural. We believe death is a punishment for sin. It's unnatural, and that's why there's no one who mourns death more than we Christians. Even though we have the greatest hope that those who die as friends of God will live forever and rise again, because death is unnatural. So the mind is just that glove that's on the soul when it expresses itself in its intellect and will. And the soul is much more than that. So I answered your second question too. I couldn't possibly, because AJ's second question, what was the soul? And the soul keeps us alive. So let me say a bit more about the soul, because the globalists don't think this either. The globalists think that, well, if all the chemicals and genes and the cells in the bright order, you're going to stay alive. Death only happens because something breaks down. And that's just not true. The soul has an appointed time to live. And when its time is up, it cannot maintain the body and life. So you have some people who have horrible diseases living to 110. And some people in perfectly good health and drop dead at the 18. And I'm not talking about because of any problem. This wasn't their appointed time. And the soul can maintain us in life because it's everywhere in the body, but it's not part of the body. So it's always, it can be solving infinite problems at a time, because it is beyond number. It is above number. And so, but within the realm of the body, it can do that. Whereas angels can do it outside of any boundaries, but still within some kind of boundaries. And God can do it infinitely in all places, all times, simultaneously. That's why how Christ can be in that blessed sacrament everywhere in the world where the blessed sacrament is. And this is why we should have a great respect. If we're in good health, it is first because of our soul. And this is why a lot of people fall into ill health after sinning. Because when you sin, you're putting an obstacle between your soul and the light of God. And the soul is like a sunflower. It has to come out and open and follow God. And if it doesn't follow God, I guess a sunflower without light is going to go, and we're that. So the sunflower in the morning is looking this way at the sun. As the sun travels across the sky, it goes like that. That's what God made our soul to do. And so if you're not praying, if you're sinning, terrible tragedies can happen to you just from the physics. I know a priest, I didn't know it at the time, but he was committing adultery with women in cars, He tried to start a lawnmower and he ripped all the tendons in his leg. The doctor said he wouldn't walk for the rest of his life. Now, how starting a lawnmower, you could induce a twisting in your leg so much that you would rip all the tendons, or like 8 or 9 major tendons in your knee. Yeah, well, I found out 30 years later it's because he was whoring with women, a priest, a friar too. So, your soul, his abilities have to do with the spiritual life too. And this is where the globalists err in the second greatest way. You can never dominate a human soul. You cannot enslave a human soul except by consent. But even if you trick someone into slavery, to the worst of sins, even in the darkest night, in the darkest moment of his life, he can snap out of it and turn back to God. And we see this in the horrible tragedies of the Soviet era and of the Nazi state and of some communist countries, that even in the worst of situations, there were moments of tremendous humanity where people who didn't even believe in God realized this is wrong. And God made us to love the light and what is good. You can't exterminate that from the soul, no matter how much you try. Whereas globalists, they think they can exterminate that. and that they can somehow dominate man, and there'll be no more rebellions. It will be like the poor will always serve the rich, and they won't have to pay.
Yeah. So then we get into this struggle. We kind of knew what was going on because people were getting a little more vicious. But then when the globalists told Putin to start this war, this flesh and blood war in Ukraine, they also started another war where people were just taken over.
Mhm. So the first method, the globalists, the Freemasons, even Russian, whether it's Russian propaganda or Nazi propaganda or globalist propaganda or the leftist propaganda, is to use emotion, the emotion that should be supporting the truth and opposing error, but to attach it to the opposite. So just anger attached to promoting injustice. Loving compassion attached to not love, but hate. And if you live in social media, live in modern culture, and have never critically examined things and gone along with the flow, like dead fish down a river, only dead fish always go with the flow, then as soon as they can trigger that emotion, they'll capture your mind. And you won't be thinking about what you're doing. Oh, that's mean. That's not love. Love is triumph. Well, of course, anyone thinking that, love, I should be hailing the triumph of love. But the question is that love or is that hate? And the only way you can answer those questions is start thinking ethically, rationally. And it really helps to be a Christian and to know revelation. And you can't do it without error unless you are a Christian and believe deeply in Jesus Christ as your Lord and Master and your teacher. And so all they have to do is launch some kind of accusation that they think they got you on your emotions. So if they want to launch propaganda to trigger a lefty, they're going to say, oh, you bigoted, that's nasty bigotry, you're not fair, you're being cruel, why didn't you are more accepting, it's supposed to be a church open to everyone, you're such a bigot, you're prejudiced, you're unfair, you're unjust, you're cruel, you're a hypocrite, you're a Pharisee, you do even worse things than you do pretend to be holy. There's all the emotion. But what are they promoting? Abominable immorality. The other kind of propaganda is the Russians are expert at. Oh, that government is just homosexual. Homosexuals are the worst people on earth. If you support anyone in that country, you're supporting homosexuality. That's an abomination. You are not an honest Christian. You've been hoodwinked into globalism. Well, unless you start thinking, wait, it's a mortal sin to bear false witness. Is it true that that nation is all gay? I mean, you couldn't even say the Netherlands is all gay, and when the Netherlands is extremely far left. But you go to Ukraine and you will not see, I have not seen anywhere in the world, except once in the United States, when I was hitchhiking, I had my habit on, and there was a guy at a pit stop, and he was a Hell's Angel motorcycle, black leather, chains. This guy was like, his shoulders went like that, and he was like bald-headed with strange hair with like this, and this guy probably goes to the gym every day of his life for the last 30 years. He must have been weighed like 300 and it wasn't fat. And he saw me in the habit. He's not he obviously wasn't a Catholic, and he never saw a man wearing a tunic because it was like, he thought this is a man dressed like a woman, and he was like, and I started smiling because I was saying he's having the right natural reaction, because as an anthropologist, I understood his misunderstanding. I have not seen that anywhere else in the world except in the Ukraine. In the Ukraine, it happens almost every day, especially from Ukrainian soldiers. They're like, because the Orthodox monks don't wear their habit in public. Okay. So they're like, you know, what are you? Occasionally, one or two of them saw a documentary in Franciscans. It's like, oh, that's wonderful. I'd love to wear the habit. You know, I see. Are you Catholic? No, I'm Orthodox. They say. You just watch a movie or so. Yeah, I saw that movie. So I know, as an anthropologist, that this is one of the most normal countries in the world. It's more normal than the United States. So to smear these people without accusation, I mean, that is vile. That is absolutely vile. I mean, there are certain politicians that are that way, but it is not Christian morality to just go out and start saying it. To shame a person with their most grave moral failures. You know, if your mayor of your town is that way, and you had something to do in town hall, you don't knock on the mayor's door and start insulting him for his moral turpitude. That's called contumely. It's a mortal sin. It's a mortal sin to insult someone to the face, even if he deserves it. You could only under the rarest circumstances and for the salvation of soul, not to satisfy your own personal hatred or a sense of revenge or political agenda. That you reprove someone for their sins, and it should be done with charity, not hatred. And so to accuse the whole nation of that, and they therefore say, abandon them because otherwise you're not true Christians. You know, if you're a believing Christian and you take the commandments seriously, especially thou shalt not bear false witness, you know, and charity believes, charity thinks no evil. Then you should have some qualms of conscience about buying that kind of propaganda book, line and sinker. It's very devious because it plays up to the Christian Pharisee, who doesn't really care about his neighbor, who just cares about pretending to be holy. So it really has taken down the entire conservative movement in the West, which is run by Christian Pharisees, the really Masons and non-Christians. Mm-hmm. And it is calculated to do that. They know that most of the Christians in the West are hypocrites, and that's how you take them down, a hypocrite. How did they crucify our Lord? How did the enemies of God get Christ crucified? Well, he drank too much wine. He went to too many parties. That was one side of the propaganda, so that no Jew who was involved in asceticism and might have been a disciple of John the Baptist would follow him. Oh, don't listen to him. He's a drunkard. All his friends are drunk. I mean, his apostles only started following him after they drank like 120 gallons of wine at Cana. So you know he's a drunkard. You know, this guy's like a hippie, and he's probably smoking pot and doing stuff like that. Then how did they detach him from the people who wanted mercy and compassion for workers? Christ is those heathen people. Oh, well, you know, you're just, you know, you're faking that. You're in league with the devil. You're not really caring for those people. It's the devils are just tricking everyone. You're really in league with the devil. You know, that's what you're really up to. You're a religious charlatan. You know, you need to be taken out because you're just going to deceive Israel. You know, and then the political thing. Well, this guy keeps preaching, the Romans are going to come and burn our temple down. And, you know, we have to show submission to the Romans. I mean, if we have a Messiah, he has to be a bit more discreet like this. He can't start raising people from the dead all over the place. That's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And with those three narratives, they detached from Jesus Christ all of his disciples, even his apostles. Oh, then we can talk about the threats. So that when he died, he had one male disciple at the foot of the cross, John, and he had 3 or 4 women. And that was God. That's how strong propaganda can be. That it hoodwinked dozens of saints who went on to die as martyrs. So don't think it can't hoodwink you. And don't presume you haven't been hoodwinked. Examine thyself, as it says in, I think, the Book of Wisdom. Examine thyself. Don't look at the sin in the other person. First saying, I'm keeping the law of God. What is the law of God? And that claim that I heard, is that based on reality? Is that claim justified in the moral law? Is it based on exaggeration? Is it unjust? Is it calumny? Is it based on defamation? Is it even rational? Aristotle would say it's rational. Thomas Aquinas said, it's a sophistic argument or not? Does it make sense? For example, if it is right that you should write off the Ukraine because, its leaders are homosexual and therefore everyone in the country is gay and supporting the country, supporting a gay regime, then let's just change the contents of that argument. Does that mean defending the borders in Texas means that you're a pedophile because the president of the United States' son is a pedophile and that he seems to be? You're all pedophiles down there in Texas. Any person that wants to defend the borders, you're all pedophiles because the American government's pedophile and everything in the United States is pedophiles. If you defend an American in Thailand, you're just supporting pedophilia. Now, isn't that obviously an absurd and illogical argument? Then why do you accept that argument as being valid against the Ukraine if you don't accept it against the United States? And you take the word United States out and put any other country in there, Spain, France, Italy. It doesn't make any sense, does it? Of course not, because it's not rational, it's not logical, it's not honest, and it's not just. But then ask yourself, what kind of sin it is to accept that argument against a Christian nation, which is one of the most conservative in Europe, so that they can be gobbled up by a criminal oligarchy in Russia run by Jewish Bolsheviks, who already tried to exterminate Ukraine once in the Holodomor.
Mm-hmm.
You know what kind of sin that is? And to start shouting it at people, saying nasty things and calumniating them if they don't agree with that silly argument.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I say people, if you don't pay attention to the voices you're listening to, you can become a great servant of Satan, doing evil by repeating lies simply because you don't live the faith. You haven't submitted your intellect. You don't know the principles that judge right and wrong, because you would have if you had been living your Christian faith. And that's mind control. And so by a false narrative, they have taken over your soul, because out of negligence, you consented to the lie and you become the servant of a lie. And they don't have any wires plugged into your head. There's no chip installed there. And I'm talking about people who haven't even taken the vax, so you can't claim there's some kind of things they've been injected to that changes their state of mind. And yet it's total mind control and total soul control, because people who die in this state will go to hell. There's absolutely no doubt about it, because no liar shall enter into the reign of God, as St. Paul says. Neither liars nor thieves, nor fornicators, nor the unclean. He says they'll not enter the kingdom of God. Liars is right up at the top. Calumny is even worse than lying, because you're using it to destroy someone. And to calumniate a whole nation of 46 million people, according to St. Alphonsus, means you're guilty of 46 million mortal sins of calumny. Now, on the scales of eternity, where is 46 million mortal sins going to take you?
Yeah.
That's like, spiritual lead, you're going to go fast.
So now we get to number 5, but I have some quotes from that video. Number 5 is, why do these globalists want to control the mind? And these quotes are, there's one group studying how to literally hook a cord to the back of the head, like you saw they did to Keanu Reeves in The Matrix. You saw how painful that was to him. Then there's another group that wants to wirelessly hook up the mind to create a new internet called BrainNet, where we speak how angels speak. Now they want to control our mind, so in the words of Elon Musk, to become pets. This way they know we won't rebel from them.
So where does this desire come from? Well, it's obviously comes from the most consummate pride, avarice, and desire for dominion. It comes from people who think they're God and are looking for denizens in their new world. See, the new world order means a world where you serve us and we are your gods. That's why these people are all worshiping Satan. They don't want the true God, because the true God means I have to respect these people as immortal beings. But if I clear away all Christianity, and especially the Catholic Church, then I can make these people slaves of my family forever, and they're going to love it. And if I want to take this little girl and rape her 5 times a day, she's going to enjoy it and thank me for it, because I'll have her mind totally controlled.
Yeah, this brings up another point from the video. This will help them to get us to accept AI. AI is their everything, and they want to create an AI system like in the movie Minority Report and iRobot, to see, to hear, and to be everywhere. They are literally creating this and to make AI their god, and and all they get under their control.
Yeah, so they know they're not God and they want to be God, but they still need divine perfection. And they know they don't have it because they don't believe in God. So a really faithful Christian doesn't fear whether there's arrows flying at day or bullets at night, because he knows if he does the will of God and stays on the path God chose for him, he won't suffer no harm. And even if his enemies slay him, he'll live forever as a martyr. But godless people don't think that way. The wealthy are absolutely terrified. They're going to lose their power, lose their money, and lose their control. So they've been worried about this ever since the labor riots of the 1860s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And this is why they're working on this. They know that once we know what they really want for us, we're going to get rid of them all. They're all going to hang for this horrible plot they've hatched against humanity. And they do everything to suppress it, short of, shutting off AJ's internet so he can't publish any videos, or shutting down my phone so I can't do it. I mean, that's really petty, but that's how much they fear. Why should they be so afraid of AJ and Brother Alexis? I mean, how many people will listen to us? But they're terrified. They're terrified of the truth. If people actually know what they're up to, that these people don't deserve to live on the face of the earth. There's no criminal deserving of capital punishment more than they. And I'm not saying one of them, I'm saying the whole lot of them that are involved in this. They're involved in something that's more than just worshiping Satan.
Mm-hmm.
It's destroying humanity. Okay. I can understand some nut that in his own private basement worships Satan. That's a horrible thing already. But someone who's actually doing that so they can destroy everyone else, that's psychopathy. That's absolute psychopathic. And so they need AI. AI is like their guardian angel. They need something. They're dreaming to make it, Well, you can never have artificial intelligence because a machine is made of things. And so it can never have an understanding of all of them together. And the soul of any single person, even the smallest child, will always be superior to the most supreme AI, because the child can always do something that the AI could never anticipate. And this is what will keep us free from AI if we don't start living like dogs. If you live like dogs and do the same thing every day and never use your mind, then you can be controlled. Mm-hmm. Propaganda can only control you if you don't use your mind to examine it. If you're not living for higher principles and looking back to the God who is one and perfectly simple. And the more you reflect on God and know God, the more you are free from any kind of control like this. But they need AI, and boy, are they putting billions into this to develop super fast computers, and they have scientists all around the world, striving. They're kind of like the 19th century. They thought they could make a perpetual motion machine and generate electricity for nothing. They didn't even bother to ask, does that violate the laws of physics? Insanity prevailed. They tried many times and it failed. But sanity finally prevailed. It's like, no, that violates the law of physics. And actually, AI also violates the laws of set theory. It was already proven by one of the greatest mathematicians in the 60s that by no program with finite or near infinite lines of command could you ever develop a mind that could know all things, even things it never met or encountered. It violates the fundamental laws of set theory. So it's in vain that they're striving to do this. But on the way, they're really doing a lot of carnage, and they're really doing a lot of evil, and they must be stopped.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how do we fight to save the mind and soul?
We first have to want to save our souls eternally. We have to turn back to God, and we have to want to live forever in his kingdom. We have to recognize that we are made for that and not for this world. And only once we get on that path and turn in that direction, our soul, which is like a crystal, gets that right amount of light so it can burn paper and destroy evil in this world. And that's the only way to do it. And so you have to be a person of prayer and of faith, of the Catholic faith. And if not the prayer that just recites things and then goes about the way it's always been, but the prayer that changes your life and changes the direction of your feet and of your soul and of your heart and of your mind, and gets you to stop sinning and gets you to examine things and gets you to realize that the world, the flesh, and the devil are our enemies. In baptism, we renounce them. We have to recognize that as soon as you turn on a channel that's not a Catholic channel, or sometimes even if it calls itself such, as soon as you read a newspaper that's not a Catholic newspaper, as soon as you listen to any politician who's not a member of a Catholic party, you're probably hearing lies, and you're probably being deceived into this entire project. And that is not a dark view of the world. That is the world illuminated by Catholic truth. And we have to stop lying to one another. We have to raise this generation and the next, and from here on, to what is really going on in the world. And don't give your kids things like video games that make them deceived about what's really going on in the world. As soon as you know what's really going on in the world, you're going to save yourself a lot of trouble. I can tell you, I spent 35 years of suffering because I didn't know what was really going on in the world. And I've learned more what's going on in the world in the last 2 years helping AJ and the military's radio than I ever learned in university. Okay, so it is important to have knowledge of what's going on in the world, but a strong Christian faith and spirituality to see it for what it is. And it's not just resisting. We have to start doing things they definitely don't want us to do. We talked about it the other day. The Catholic Party is the only way to save America. You don't do that, and you're dead.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just a nice idea. It's not just a quaint proposal. It is the only way to save America. And we get these hecklers because I've said this many times before. Oh, brother, the only way to save America is God. You're trying to imply that the Catholic Party is our salvation. See, that's very satanic. That's like saying, well, you're confusing the apple for, you can eat that apple. You're not going to die. Don't confuse the apple with death. I mean, it's entirely two different things. They would only say that if they're trying to manipulate you. Well, as we've explained, the Catholic Party can't save you, but because the Catholic Party is perfectly submitted to Jesus Christ, and he is our savior, you can't be saved out. I mean, it's like saying Jesus and his ship, that will save you from a shipwreck. But unless you grasp the life preserver, and the life preserver is tied to a rope to Jesus' ship, you're not going to get saved. And there's someone on board that's willing to rope that in, you're not going to save. So, the next time you're drowning in the ocean, someone throws you life preserver, and you say, well, that's not my savior. Only Jesus is my savior. You're going to drown.
Mm-hmm.
Because Christ's salvation reaches us through human persons. And there has to be some political party that serves Jesus Christ and has people in your neighborhood that are members that are willing to defend his laws, even when they're elected to any office in your town. You're not otherwise going to get saved. That's common sense. And to craft any argument against that, to make that look irrational, stupid, or silly, is demonic. It's insane. And it's psychotic.
So What can yeah, what can Catholic Party do to stop these people in their technology?
Well, we need, first of all, the biggest thing is we need to totally revise the legal code and establish Christian morality as the law, so that even if there isn't a law written on the books by men saying that that is a crime, that it is a crime. Because they'll just keep inventing 1,000 ways of committing new crime and say, oh, it's not on the books. I can get away with it. That's called legal or juridical positivism. It was condemned by Benedict XVI. It was condemned long before Benedict XVI because it's just absurd. But that's the game they've been playing since the French Revolution. To clone someone, that should be outlawed. To abort a child, to put genetic experimentations, even on a human soul, on a soul taken from a human body, that should be forbidden. The alteration of the human genome in any person, with or without their consent, that has to be forbidden. Cloning of people has to be forbidden. Cloning of animals has to be forbidden. That is an abomination. To mix the genes of one species with another, that is an abomination, even if you're doing it with the bacteria in a petri dish. It is an abomination because God has decided to create the living things of the earth. He is their Lord, and you don't have any power to create. In the 80s, they developed a mouse that always dies of cancer and patented. To patent a living thing, that is an abomination. To attempt to create artificial intelligence, that is an abomination. Anyone involved in that project is an enemy of humanity. If you are involved in a project to create robotics, or to create a machine that can kill people by the press of a button, that is an abomination. To create a machine that talks to people instead of a person, that's an abomination. To create a program that answers questions on the internet instead of a real hired person doing it, that's an abomination. Don't call a machine or a program by a name. That's an abomination. We have to realize that we have to have humility in our technology. There are some things we cannot do that is immoral to do. Just because we can do it doesn't mean it's right. We have to totally abandon the whole Masonic concept. And to create artificial things that are much more costly, damaging to the society, that's an abomination. An electric car is an abomination. We don't have the technology to do batteries well enough and cheaply enough to make electric cars. You know how many tens of thousands of tons of earth have to be ripped up to make an electric car? You know, petroleum is already, crude oil is already in the ground. God created the earth with crude oil. It's there. It's a natural thing. There's absolutely nothing wrong taking it out, refining it, and using it as fuel. It's actually the most efficient thing. You try to do all these other fancy things because you're somehow opposed to burning carbon. God made carbon able to burn. He made trees able to burn. If you're against burning carbon, you're against something that God gave us as a gift for our natural resources. So this war against nature, the idea that the sin of man is causing a global climate change, that's an abomination. That's an idol. That's implying that the sins of man can alter God's rule over the world. It doesn't work that way. Even physically, it's impossible that the sun, which is like, trillions of times more powerful than the entire human race together, could ever, influence the weather on the earth in such a way that man would make a difference. It's not going to happen that way. And those are all false religions, false pretenses. And we have to get back to believing in Jesus Christ, establishing his law as the law of the land, and outlawing these outlandish lies, these outlandish projects, these evil designs. We have to make a lot of this kind of research absolutely immoral. It has to be a crime. It has to be like a Nuremberg violation. Mm-hmm. And you can see in the last 2 years, there are people, many of them saying, oh, well, Nuremberg doesn't set a precedent. The Nuremberg Code isn't a law. You violate that, that's not a crime. And then they have the goal to claim that some, person in the crowd holding a Confederate flag is a Nazi. That's really rich, You're advising people to violate the Nuremberg Code. You calling someone else a Nazi? Yeah, sure. But the only people can do this is Christians. And the only way they can do it is through a Christian party that totally bucks all the preconceptions that we've been taught since the French Revolution. It has to totally go against them all. And if you start talking this way, yeah, you're going to get a lot of enemies, but you'll have victories because the truth will win out. You got to explain it to people point by point. You know.
Any final thoughts?
Transhumanism is the punishment for apostasy. If you don't spend 100% of the forces you have now, of the little liberty you have now, to return back to Christian civilization totally and completely, and stop this whole era of tolerating this agenda, you're going to be gone. Your children are going to be gone. You're going to be gone and gone. You know, they'll put you down when you get here. You start teetering and tottering for euthanasia because they're pushing us on all the points. They're attacking our civil and human liberties on all these things. Hospitals have been turned into Auschwitz. They're killing people, and they're hiding them away. Oh, you can't see Granny because you might catch a virus. So we're going to take Granny and take care of her. Oh, she died. Isn't that a shame? Because we overdosed her on purpose because we're paid by the government to overdose. And so the reign of Satan is already here. So and you can't start pretending it's going to go away. So where are the Catholics founding new hospitals? Catholics founding new schools? The Catholics founding new political parties? The Catholics founding new societies? Sometimes the Catholics will even have to found a lot of other institutions because all the institutions are failing. Where is it? You know, we get a lot of guff in Order Militaris because we are an organization that is capable of training people to found new institutions, at least for security and defense. And people are like, oh, you're just dreaming. You're just dreaming. No, we're not dreamers. This is the solution. That's why we're hated on all sides. You know. So if you are promoting the hate of Catholic restoration on any point, you're serving Satan. You're serving the Antichrist. And you can't just be opposing the Antichrist on one point. You got to oppose him on all the points. Otherwise, you're still his servant.
Yep. So you can watch a few documentaries I put into the show page below our video where it will be. So please take time to watch them. They're not as bad as The Minds of Men, but still, don't let your kids watch them by themselves. They get freaked out.
I want to thank the one viewer of Order Militaris Radio TV that for one of the last episodes donated $10. I mentioned the fact that the average donations from everyone who sees the programs is $10 per show total. That means a total of all the donations received is $10. And this guy donated $10. I want to thank you for that, maybe with a little humor, saying that I want to be the one guy that thanks you. But, you know, if you like the programs, please support us. And we're going to need more support because as they shut off internet connections and cell phones, we have to buy other internet connections and other cell phones to keep the truth coming out. Otherwise, this is probably the last Catholic apostle that will ever tell you the truth. And because they can shut a little, if they're going after a little group like this, you'll never have a big apostle that actually go towards the truth without them getting bumped off some way or the other.
Yeah. So this is Order Militaris Radio TV signing off. Deus Volt.
Deus Volt.